here in Wake County Public Schools. And I'm hopeful that some of you have started with our 2 other sessions done by our DLCs. We've been really excited about today. We've had over 125 people in sessions already today, so thank you for joining us here. I feel like as we talk about AI and we talk about leading, it's appropriate to start with some nostalgia. So on the previous slide, you'll remember that we were talking about leading like it's day one. And so I want to give a shout out to Harry Wong's The First Days of School, right? This is sort of a core book that's pushing 35 years old at this point. And when I think back to our planning and leading of what we do intentionally in schools, I think about all the time I spent as a building administrator over the summer thinking about minute by minute, hour by hour, what is the experience of staff when they come back in the building? We had plans for everything. We had schedules for when PLCs were going to meet. We had schedules for when the faculty meeting was going to meet. We had to do all the trainings. Everybody's got to watch that bloodborne pathogens video again. And so as we think about leading in AI, I want to lean in a little bit on some old school approaches to this, right? So what I like about it is his whole perspective was about expectation and routine. Instead of just starting with processes and consequences, which are easy to do, right? I expect you to do this, and this is what happens if you don't. Like, think about how we build the routines of using things the appropriate way. Because if we fill our brains and our practices with appropriate uses of things, the space to do inappropriate things is greatly decreased. Also, by positioning AI, right? This is a thing that teachers are talking about. Some are super excited about it. Some are a little nervous about it. I know at the secondary level for sure, there's a lot of concern around academic integrity and honesty. And starting both with faculty and with students in the building early and saying, hey, AI is here, and this is what we believe about it and how we're going to use it effectively and safely is an important place to start. And again, focusing on the idea of procedures and training from the get-go. So the goal today is to talk about 2 separate things. I think sometimes in schools we have these great ideas and we share these great ideas, but we stay in theory land, which doesn't actually always help us put it into practice. So we're going to do 2 things today. We're going to talk about the difference between leading in a world where AI is changing the world around us, and we're going to talk about leading AI work. And then a little while later, we'll talk a little bit about practical applications for what we can do. I'm going to share one in particular with us and talk about a few other ones. We on the digital learning team have been talking about AI for a long time. And for us, we continue to hearken back to the strategic plan. So this is the vision statement taken directly from the strategic plan. And when we think about AI, we lean really deeply into the idea of we can understand that AI is a major factor in this complex and changing world. And if our job is to ensure that students reach their full potential and lead productive lives in that complex and changing world, this is one of the variables where we have to build capacity and literacy. And if our teachers are going to do that, we as leaders have to be prepared to help them as adults on that journey as well. So our core identity that we've come back to is the idea that artificial intelligence can amplify the work of students and educators when utilized as a partner in the process of developing ideas. And I'm going to stop here for a second and talk about the word amplify, because it's important to understand that AI is amplifying things, but it's not the first technology to amplify what we do in schools. When I started teaching, which I used to feel like was 4 days ago, but now I'm realizing when I started teaching, the expectation in the faculty handbook was that I had to check my email once a week. In 2007, I could go days without checking my school email. That would be a real bad time in modern educational settings. And so email has amplified as parents have picked up on it and schools have leveraged it, and we have realized that we can do a lot of things. Think about the amplification of communication that has happened in schools in the last 20 years. We have gone from sending lots of paper home and hoping parents get it to being able to say, oh no, we forgot about this last minute thing. Here's a message to a class from a teacher. You know, I'm a parent, so I get talking points all the time. Hey, we're out of snacks. If anybody can bring some, that'd be great. And it's great to be able to engage, but that is a similar sort of amplification. So we don't want to think about AI as the first thing to revolutionize or amplify anything. But simultaneously, it amplifies and sometimes can seem confusing, right? So later on, when we do talk about addressing some behavior, it's important to remember that it just amplifies behaviors that already exist. It's not necessarily inventing new behaviors or new intentions. It's just amplifying how those things are happening. The reason that we have to think logically and structurally about this is because it is here, right? Everyone's talking about it. I don't think you can listen to the radio or watch TV for an hour without hearing at least one advertisement for some product that says, now with the power of AI, which is a little silly considering we've been using AI for a long time. I don't have Clippy on this slide, but I am glad that we can get to the Clippy GIFs and Clippy stickers in our Microsoft Teams. But that's an early AI that some of us loved to hate and hated to love. So it's already there. Your staff are tinkering with it and using it. We know that kids are tinkering with it and using it. And our job is to make sure that we acknowledge the place that those tools have in our instructional values in the buildings. And it's a little bit to me like breathing, right? Like when I ask students, hey, do you know how your breathing works? They often say, yeah, when you breathe in, you suck air in, but in reality, your diaphragm expands your lungs and it creates an uneven pressure gradient and air is forced into your body. So again, right, like you can do things the right way or you can resist them, but AI is out there and it's going to force its way into the building if you don't have a plan to do it the right way. So just really quickly, that was a lot of talking. I'm going to not talk for a full 30 seconds because I want you to think about what is one routine or expectation that you always set on day one with staff and or day one with students. Yeah, and so, right, what we see here are two sort of thematic things that we set as expectations. Neither of them are based around a consequence or discipline, right? They are either a clear expectation, right? We are setting an expectation of being here on time. This is what on time means. Or larger value statements of your job is to be here and to find success, to be successful, to do your best, right? Those are larger value statements where we are trying to help center the student in what is possible for them. And I think either of those perspectives is really important as we talk about AI because there are concerns and there is anxiety about AI. And it's important to be able to acknowledge that, but not start from a place of protectionism and fear and consequence. So just really quickly, right? These are three sort of key takeaways from Wong's original text. Procedures, expectations, and monitoring, right? So the first thing we all need to think about is in our building, how do we define these expectations? When do we use it? How do we use it? And why do we use it? And I want to tell you this right now. This is maybe the most important thing I'm going to say today. Those three things are different for every school and for every community. You may have seen a graphic with an arrow that runs up and down that talks about, is it cheating? And I use that a lot when I present with schools. And if I'm working with a school and people's lines where they believe cheating starts, if they're all over the place, great. You're not ready to onboard a ton of AI use. You are ready to have conversations about how you believe AI fits into your work. Versus if everybody's in a same spot about where they believe AI can help and then where it's too much, they can begin to set meaningful expectations about, great, this is how we can use AI. This is the point at which we stop using it. And again, this is great. Like DLCs can come and work with you on all these things if you are interested or looking for ways to get those into writing. And then again, modeling expectations, demonstrating responsible use. And some of that is just learning to be a little more proficient yourself. Those of us who have been working on the AI policy writing team have gotten some really great input from Adam Gary, who's working with us. And he said, your job is just to pick one tool that you like and use it every day. Use one thing that you like for something every day. And then you start to build ideas and understand, and the whole thing can sort of snowball. And then monitoring and reinforcing, right? We want to check in, how's it going? Are there concerns? Are there patterns you're seeing? And also, like, again, this is not new, calling out the really cool practices. I felt like $1 million when my principal shouted me out in an email when I checked it on Thursday. I only had to check it once a week. But came into my band room and was like, oh my gosh, the formative assessment that was happening in Mr. Patton's room was so great. I felt awesome. And how great is it when we can take something that is causing some folks anxiety and recognize those who are doing a great job in figuring it out. That helps build coherence and community in the building, as well as a greater sense of self-efficacy. So really quickly, because now I'm running out of space here. These are just some very, very early examples, right? Like, what do AI expectations look like? For those of us who are entering into this new, right? Like, it might be easier just to say, hey, for now, staff, we're only going to use AI for planning purposes. We have to have some conversations as a staff before we think about like really designing activities for students with it, or allowing students to use an AI product. Similarly, and this is actually a really important one, ensuring that teachers understand that feedback with AI might be fine, right? Helping AI allow you to get meaningful feedback out is great. It is still your human embodied responsibility to assign a grade per North Carolina law. So that would be an expectation you would want to set. Like, here is the limit of professional AI use. You should not rely on AI to give you qualitative grades in that way. For students, right, we need to tell them what's appropriate and what is not. AI is great for brainstorming, but when it comes time to do the writing, you actually need to put your fingers on the keyboard or pen to paper. Harder to do AI pen to paper, though. For everybody, we don't always need to create a new policy. We have an academic honor code. And in that academic honor code, it says what appropriate academic practice is. And again, because AI amplifies our intent, when students cheat, AI does make that easier, but also, like, they will learn less. If the intention is to do the easy thing quickly, it can do that. The easy thing quickly doesn't allow you to learn. The easy thing quickly, even more quickly, allows you to learn even less. And then over time, as parents get into this and they begin to have questions, how, is my student going to get in trouble for this? My kid is using AI to do this. We are going to want to start having the conversations with parents about how we're using that in instruction, how we are helping train their students to be AI literate. So I tried to go way back. Shout out to my former principal, Dana King. She was the best at long-term planning. If you have to have this meeting every week, I want you to assign every week meeting. I want the date for every meeting you're going to have all year in a memo to the person you're meeting with. Put on your calendar. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. So in that spirit, how do we sort of walk this out over time in a school? We don't have to do it all at once. We don't have to have some big faculty meeting where, okay, guys, this is the AI meeting. We can put some stuff out there in a handbook, or we can go over it briefly with staff. Then at a different meeting later, maybe we do a demo. Maybe we ask a teacher to come in and demo. In week 3, maybe we're planning a mini lesson with our students where we're stating those expectations once we've had some time as a community to get together and understand what our expectations are. We then begin to share those with students. So we start making sure the procedures and routines around that are solid. And then finally, we want to start thinking about the instructional piece of that. How do we in PLCs set those things? And I'm actually going to go back a few slides because I forgot to talk about this arrow. When we think about leading and we think about expectations and we think about all of this, we both have to think vertically and horizontally, just like we do with academic planning, to make sure that a student's experience K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 progresses in a way that is coherent. But also, if we live in a world where one content area says absolutely not, no AI, and another content area says, yeah, do whatever, we don't really care, then students aren't understanding what the expectation is. They don't have firm footing anywhere. So we have to make sure those expectations are showing up both horizontally and vertically. Three quick things. I just tried to pull these off the top of my head. I actually did not use AI for this. Maybe I should have, but think about something you might do in the next 10 days just to get started, right? Like the hardest thing to do when looking at a piece of blank paper is to figure out what the first thing to draw is. So that is really what I would challenge you to do leaving here today is what can you do in the next 10 days? And none of this is big, right? Can you just begin to draft a use protocol? Do you or somebody you work with have the ability to go in and train at a staff meeting before the end of the year to say, hey, look at this cool thing we did? Can you have a teacher share an example of how they're using it for their planning, or if they have expectations to use it in classrooms, what they're doing with students? But that would be my challenge to all of you is think about one thing you can do in the next 10 days within your sphere of influence, just to get the needle moving on thinking about AI in the same context with which we set expectations about getting to class on time, about trying our best, about how to go to lunch. Just like we do with every other expectation we're familiar with, we have to begin doing that for AI as well. I'm going to speed run a use case real quick so that we save time for questions. In this case, one thing that we know is, for those of you here are administrators or IFs, you may have been pulled to cover a class. You know what happens if something comes on the radio and you got to go help. It's very hard to get things done. And it's very hard to always be available for people at their convenience. And so I want to share with you guys a use case for how to build a coaching support resource with Notebook LM. And there's another session later today on Notebook LM for planning that I highly recommend you attend as well if you find this compelling. Let me get out a full screen and let me share this tab. That one, here we go. So if you just type in notebooklm.google.com, it'll take you to a login. You can log in with your Wake County Google account. This is currently turned on for you as a Google user in Wake County schools. In here, you build notebooks. I'm not going to build one. I'm going to show you one that is built first and talk about the use case. So in this case, we have a school who is trying to get their teachers to be able to more readily implement Costa's levels of questioning. And if you're there like, I don't know what Costa's level of questioning are, don't worry. I don't really either. And for our purposes here today, I'm going to pretend like we're working with a 7th grade English PLC. And if I have a 7th grade English PLC and maybe I have some inexperienced teachers, they're not really used to writing questions because again, in 7th grade, they're working with the EL curriculum, right? So they have some questions. So not only do they have to read those and understand what level the prescribed questions are, but how can they then be adept at extra questions when we're trying to move students forward in learning? And so what we have done in this notebook is I have added 3 sources. And I can do that again. I'll show you where I added those. I built sure would be great if it worked the way I thought it would. My drive, I built a notebook demo folder that's empty, which is strange because it wasn't last night. But as you can see, this is my Google Drive. So if I have a resource, I can go in here and add it directly from Google Drive. I can also just upload a copy of a thing, right? I can go in here and say, oh, maybe I need to work with 3rd grade as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add that 3rd grade set of standards right here. And what's neat about this is you can go in and verify exactly what the content of that source is by clicking on it. And now, just that quickly, I can say, can I please have an example of level 3 questions? Let's do 7th grade. For 7th grade reading for literature, RL, let's do 7.1 and 7.2 related to, oh, what's a fun book? Somebody put their favorite book in the chat for me. where the wild things are. Dope. Love it. Here we go. And so I can send that. And what the notebook does is it has some knowledge because it's a Google large language model in the background, but it's going to pull that knowledge. And the last thing it does is it looks at my actual sources over here on the left to generate level 3 questions. It tells me what they are. And then all of a sudden, it gives me an example. And it gives me the justification for why it's a level 3. So the interesting use case to me here is if I'm an instructional facilitator or an administrator, and we're trying to ensure that teachers are able to begin implementing this. It's hard, right? Teachers need those resources when they have time. And sometimes they're like, I got 20 minutes at home and it's 8:15. My instructional facilitator is not in my living room. So we can now build this. We could go in and I could add my team. I could add that 7th grade PLC. And all of a sudden, they have access to this at home on their own. And they can be like, oh, I wonder what level is this question that I thought of, right? Like they could put that in and they could get feedback on their thinking. They could put in their lesson plan and say, hey, give me 3 level 2 and 3 level 3 questions. And it can build them meaningful resources. And in the context of a PLC, if I save that as a note, then all of my colleagues have that work that I did over here on the side. There are a whole host of other features inside of Notebook LM that I'm not going to go over today. I do encourage you to go to the Notebook LM session later. They're going to go through more of the features in depth. But for our purposes today, I just really wanted to outline a quick use case where we can build a model based on our local resources that we can then share with our staff. And then they have a tool with which they can work that we can trust is aligned to exactly the work we're trying to do in our building. When I think about my work as a principal trying to do evaluations, right? I was at a high school. Right now, people are trying to do the learning model. If I'm at an IB high school, those teachers are also trying to do the approaches to learning, approaches to teaching, the IB learner profile. Trying to think about all these things in your brain when you're observing a teacher can be really hard. Imagine an admin team where they put all of their look-fors over here. You put the IB principles to practice. I'm just going to go in and say, copied text, and I'm going to say, we are looking for, and I could just go in here and paste, like, we are looking for lower teacher talk time. We are looking for greater collaboration and critical thinking from the 4 C's. Those are our look-fors for the year. And then you could go in here and say, hey, I just observed this teacher, and here are my notes, asterisk. What am I forgetting from our look-fors? And then it could help me remember, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. So that's just a neat way to consider leveling with the team. But this is a really powerful resource, especially considering that it is connected to your Wake County Google Drive. So yeah, if you've got the time later, definitely go to the Notebook LM session. If you don't have the time later, we're going to have all of these recorded and on YouTube for you to be able to view later and share with staff. I'm going to save some time for questions. And as always, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us here at the Digital Learning Team so we can come support you as best we can.
Thank you, Charles. So if you do have some questions, please feel free to either raise your hand, use that hand icon there at the bottom of the meet.
Questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or just feel free to unmute.
Okay, apparently Charles cannot hear me today. So yeah, same thing. So either feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you, or put your questions in the chat.
If you don't have questions, then I hope you have a wonderful Friday. For those of you at traditional schools, I really hope you have a great break coming up. For those of you not at traditional schools, I can't pretend to understand your calendar. I'm sorry. May the odds be ever in your favor. But yeah, if you guys need anything, we are here for you. And thanks for being here today. Did we hit 40? I'm getting put to shame. The rest of my team had like 50 and 70. Thank you guys for being here so I didn't look bad.
I have a question. Can it, and it's a very
hold on. I'm
Wait,
very
what?
sorry. My speakers are off. Can you
Oh,
try that?
he realizes now that he can't hear anyone.
My
Catherine was trying to, is it Catherine or Katie? I'm sorry. Okay, she was trying to talk earlier and say the same things you were, but then you couldn't hear her. So will Notebook LM be available for students?
So Notebook LM per Google's expectation is that it is 18 plus. So as of right now, per Google's terms of service, it's only for staff.
Okay. I mean, I know
that's
staff
like,
create things to support students, but I see a lot of ways that students could benefit from using the resource.
I am hoping that we can have some updates on not only Notebook LM, but some other Google products that will potentially be available for students in the next couple weeks. So I think before the end of the year, we'll probably be able to share some details about a more defined roadmap with tool availability and stuff like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Mike,
absolutely.
it's nice to see you, Mike.
You as well.
Well, you too, Charles.
I had a mic. Yeah,
really
sorry.
Nice to see Mike.
Whatever.
Nice to see you too, Charles. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Charles, you also had a question in the chat, which might kind of address as well, but in the same way that Wake County's provided the academic honor code, are there plans for an AI plan from the county?
Yeah. So earlier you may have heard me mention our work with Adam Gary. He's a specialist in this. He's working with Allison Reed, our senior director of digital learning, and they are working with a large cohort of essential partners, teachers, principals, folks from operations, student assignment, assistant superintendents, area superintendents. Like there's 30 people in this room, and they're going 4 full days of protocols and learning and work to really synthesize. Wake County has a lot to synthesize, and to work towards policy and guidance that are both aligned here locally and more broadly, with a really intentional timeline of release of information so that everybody is informed and that information is accurate and doesn't shift under our feet over time. So our last day is in a couple weeks. I can't speak to the draft policy timeline or any of that stuff. I would anticipate that's, I ballpark it at the beginning of next year, maybe. I'm not sure though, school board will have their summer recess. So it may be September, October before that's in place. But there may be a chance that the AI guidelines for the county come out in a draft form sooner than that. I don't know. A lot of that is beyond my scope of decision making. But what I can say is, as somebody who's like deeply invested in this work and doing it the right way, the resources and the expectations are being built very intentionally for both operational and teaching and learning use cases. Man, sorry I didn't have my speakers on, Katie.
All good. Any other questions? We are at time, and we want to make sure those of you that need to go are feel free to do so. Any other questions that anybody would like to ask? If not, or if you think of something later, please definitely reach out to your digital learning coordinators. If you're not sure who your DLC is, you can check the DLC website for now, dlc.wcpss.net, and there will be contact information there. And you are, of course, free to reach out to any of us, and we are happy to help support you consulting anything around AI. All right, everyone. Thank you so much and have a great day.